Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Khatia Kikalishvili. I am Program Director for Eastern Partnership in the Center for Liberal Modernity, and I will be moderator today. We have a forum with the name The Impact of the Russian Aggression on Neighborhood Countries, and the second but very connected topic is civil society's expectation from the EU. And we have special guests and very interesting guests from Ukraine, from Georgia, and from Moldova, and from Brussels. I will introduce very shortly our guests, and then I can start with questions, and I promise so we will have enough time for your questions and answers. I will start with Natalia Stercul. She is Executive Director of the Foreign Policy Association of the Republic Moldova, and she's expert and analyst, and for more than 5 years, but I'm sure more than 5 years, I think 10, 15 years. So she focused on the security issue and on Russia and Ukraine. She's our partner in Moldova, so in framework of our project Eastern Partnership Plus. Then I would introduce Litra. He's visiting fellow with a wider Europe program at the European Council of Foreign Relations, and he's senior fellow of the New Europe Center in Kiev, and he brought something for us to present. Yes, I'm very glad that you are here. And Mr. Dirk Schübel, he's the EU Special Envoy for the Eastern Partnership. Thank you very much that you are here with us. And before taking up this position in September 2022, he headed the EU's delegation in Belarus for 3 years. And he was also in the delegation in Ukraine. And what is very important, he is a big friend of all these countries. And last but not least, Ivane Chkhikvadze. He's also a partner for us, for Center of Liberal Modernity in Georgia since 2019. He's a program manager an EU integration program at Open Society Foundation in Georgia. And if I may, I can say that you was the guy who initiated to put EU integration of Georgia in Georgian constitution, and it works. And it is very important today. It was and is and it will be, and it prepared headaches of the pro-Russian Georgian government, I would say. Yes, thank you very much and welcome again. I will make a very short introduction. So what about we want to talk today? First of all, since February 2022, after Russian war of aggression in Ukraine, the urgency of rethinking the security dimension in the EU, especially in the neighbor countries of Ukraine and Georgia and in Moldova, has increased significantly. And these countries are directly influenced and affected by Russian imperialist policies since the 19th. We know that in Georgia and Moldova we have occupied, as in Georgia, part of the Georgian territory is occupied from Russia, and they are afraid and they are scared that these countries could, and the people and population in this country, that they could become next victims. And we have on the one hand this insecurity in increasing because Russia maintains a military presence in these countries, in Transnistria and South Ossetia and Abkhazia, and on the other hand we have a hybrid war. So this is hybrid war, and this is a topic. So which instruments Russia use to lead this hybrid war? So I would say this would be the first part of our discussion, and then I would continue connected with this topic. So how can act the EU geopolitically in these countries and in this region, and especially what can also how can increase and how can improve the European Union the security dimension, so in the neighborhood. So I would start with Natalia. I would like to hear the Moldovan voice. So please, Natalia, could you tell us about the current security situation in Moldova and in Transnistria also? And what are the tools of Russian propaganda now in your country? And what is the impact of this war in Moldova?
Dear Khatia, many thanks. Dear audience, my warmest greetings to all of you. The Russian war against Ukraine radically and dramatically changed the situation in the whole world, in EU countries, in Eastern neighborhood countries, and of course the Republic of Moldova was not an exception, unfortunately. But being the neighborhood countries with Ukraine, taking into account the Transnistrian conflict, which remained unresolved, Republic of Moldova had a lot of potential risks, first of all from military point of view. And of course, were a lot of fears, a lot of sentiment in this sense. Today, situation is a little bit more better. We can say that this Russian aggression and Russian invasion in Ukraine had created unprecedented situation and tried to rethinking main approaches and visions regarding the national security of the Republic of Moldova. And at present time, our parliament tried to discuss the new concept of security, and it is a very important issue for our future, together with rethinking or possibility or necessity to rethink question regarding the neutrality status of the country. Of course, absolutely new tendencies and approaches regarding the understanding the necessity to defend our country, to modernize the national army and reform security and defense sector radically. Transnistrian issue is very important, and it was the key alarm after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, especially you know that Transnistrian authorities practically permanent announced and calling about the recognition, international recognition of this territory, and of course for national authorities of Republic of Moldova it was a very big problem after the beginning of the war. Today we can see that we have aggravation of the military situation in regions, in Black Sea region, and of course taking into account Transnistrian issue and practically difficulties with Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe mission in Republic of Moldova. Not only it's additional point to think more broader about our regional security and impact of the Republic of Moldova to this regional security. Also, I want to focus your attention on the pro-Russian influence, because question was put about the hybrid threats. And of course, we have, as you know, first of all, northern regions of the Republic of Moldova, where are concentrating pro-Russian speaking population. We have Gagauzia, Transnistrian region, and also the localities of security zone. And I think that in this sense, these regions are very sensitive from a point of view of influence, propaganda influence, Russian propaganda and instruments that they use, disinformation, fake news, take into account the accession to the TV program and TV channels in Russian languages. It's remain very sensitive issues here in the Republic of Moldova, in spite of the measures that were taken, of course. Speaking about the Russian influence and Russian relations with Russia, we can see that practically we don't have at the present moment political dialogue. All ties were reduced, diplomatic scandal, and of course understanding that today we cannot talk and cannot think about the pragmatic relations with these countries, taking into account the Russian war against Ukraine, and Republic of Moldova condemned this war. That's why I think that it's more clear that the European way, the European path is one of the historical solution for our country. It's not only a question about the open window, it's a question about our obligation to use this window and to try to be more closer with European Union, with civilization world in general. And in this sense, I think that we need to work more hard, especially in implementation of our reforms agenda, implementation these conditions that were formulated from the part of the European Union, and of course more openness and more practical implementation of main aims which are put in some conceptual and legislative bases that were elaborated on, in recent time. I think it's a very important issue for our success, if I can say so. And also, if you allow to me, it's a question about the more closer relations with NATO. It's also a very sensitive issue for the Republic of Moldova, and probably our population are not preparing for this. But I think that for security dimension, on the regional level, on the international level, it's a very important issue to cooperate, to encourage, to prepare our population to this. Many thanks.
Thank you, Natalia. And I have a follow-up question. So I think Moldova is lucky because they have European government now. So I'm originally from Georgia, and I cannot say now that we have a pro-European government. I think Ivane will agree. I mean, this is you said this is a big chance and a window of opportunity. But for me, it's interesting to know how the population analyze or feel this war of aggression from Russia in Moldova. So I know that the population's about or more than 50%, the Moldovan population is pro-European. So are they scared that the war can continue in Moldova?
Yes, of course, we have pro-European authorities, and we are lucky in this sense. We have pro-European politics, and practically first time when it's not only declaration, we have concrete results in this sense, I can say so. It not only visibility and a special focus on reforming process in our countries. It's real processes, real actions and results that we have due to the hard work of the pro-European authorities and especially to our president. But we have a lot of problems in this sense, and I think that we need to recognize this. And of course, a lot of depends on the dialogue and communication between government and population. I think that without this, it's very difficult to weight the changes in perceptions, taking into account the Soviet past of the Republic of Moldova, taking into account the pro-Russian regions and pro-Russian influence that we have. And from political point too, you know, if we talk about the, for example, this party which was announced like as anti-constitutional shore party, but these people which were part of this party, they to try to continue this work in our country. They are with us, among us. That's why you need to talk with your population, to work with population, that it will be maybe more reliable when it not only fight with oligarchs and pro-Russian forces, but also it's work with your population, communication, strategic issues in this sense we need to elaborate. Then we will see the result. Taking about the attitude and perception towards the war, of course, I think that the majority, I hope that the majority of our population condemn the aggressive actions of Russia Federation. I am sure that it's not normal in 21st century to resolve issues in such way, but we have people that support Putin, and Putin is a very popular figure among pro-Russian political agencies, pro-Russian population, and so on. And it's true, and we need to recognize it.
Thank you very much. Bueno, we have a complete different situation in Georgia. I would like to ask you that, so please describe this very instable security situation in Georgia, and especially the news that on the de jure Georgian territory, the new military bases from Russian could be in the future. What does it mean for us and for the region? And also about the instrument of hybrid war.
Sure. Let me start with thanking Leonid and you, Khatia, and all your colleagues putting this together, this very interesting conference and meeting here. I will, of course, try to answer your question, but I will also try to address the actual title of our panel, which is about impact of the Russian aggression in neighboring countries. And I think that after the Russian aggression, I mean the attack on Ukraine of February last year, there are several issues which we have to kind of, shed the light. First, it brought actually the moment of truth when it comes to relations with the European Union, relations with Russia, and so on, because back years ago, people don't really believe that Putin was a bad guy. Despite all the things what he has been doing, still people believe that it was talking with them. Now there's a moment of truth when people really understand that it's absolutely useless talking with Putin and talking with Russia, because you can't really change that behavior. Second is we do see that still very little, but there are the attempts to bring the moral back to the international relations, to the international politics, and this is very largely thanks to Ukraine, because Ukraine is asking something that is very close to the morality, and we have been hearing this morning that they are just asking to support them in order to support us, the countries like Georgia and countries like Moldova and others. Third, I think that it also brought and unblocked the enlargement debate, basically. Because we have hearing that not very long time ago, Jean-Claude Juncker said that there is no enlargement while I'm in the office. We were also hearing a lot of wishy-washy discussions about the enlargement fatigue, and etc. and etc. Now there's not the topics like that, and the enlargement is back in the debates. And I think that we also remember, especially Mr. Schübel, that enlargement was, and the European perspective was an issue which was never answered. We all remember that it was something that every country was kind of afraid of, to give the European perspective to these states like Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, because it was something like something untouchable thing back then. Then I think that it also brought the reality when the EU is becoming the geopolitical player steadily in this process, and it also gives the hope countries like Georgia, like Ukraine and Moldova, that they can always rely on them. And last but not least, it brought the so-called this window of opportunity, which some countries are using, some countries are not really very much so. So talking about, coming back to your question about Georgia, I think that the reality is getting very harsh there, and this is again because of the war and the attack the Russian attack on Ukraine. I think that we do see now that there are some facts which is not questionable anymore, and you just mentioned about the Georgian authorities, which is not pro-European, to put it mildly, if not being pro-Russian. And the issue is that this is very much in hands of Russia, which is playing the card and which is playing on this, using all this vulnerability, basically, and trying to grab Georgia as much as possible. And in this process, we don't really see any kind of, big opposition coming from Georgian authorities, as if nothing has been happening. We have not seen any strong statements when Russia declared its plan building the maritime base on the occupied territory of Georgia, etc., etc. So this is something which is really unbelievable to see, considering all the reality on the ground and all the developments of 2008. And talking about the Georgian authorities, we also have to remember that we do understand now that they are not serious about the EU integration, because Georgian authorities had 16 months in order to deliver on 12 priorities. And according to the midterm assessment of June of the European Commission, just 3 out of 12 priorities are fulfilled. And what we see is that Georgian authorities are looking this exercise through the prism of keeping the power. Anything which might be kind of, prevent them to do this exercise, this is not something that they will do. If we look at those priorities which are fulfilled, those 3, those are more or less technical, not very political issues. But if we look at the priorities which are not fulfilled, this is about the rule of law, this is about the fight against elite corruption, this is about reforming court system. This is not something that they are keen to do and to reform, because they see it again as a threat to keep the power. And 2 more issues, and I will end up there. We also see several, and we also kind of understand two points here. One is about the Eastern Partnership. We realized that the country which was every time years ago being praised of being the front runner of the Eastern Partnership is actually the headache of Georgians and also of the European Union. So it very much says and demonstrates that being the front runner is rather the curse than the praise. And I don't think that this helped Georgia, because every time when Georgian civil society were saying that there are problems in rule of law, there are problems in reforming judiciary, we were kind of, appeased and said that, okay, calm down, everything is going well. And at the end of the day, it turned out that nothing is going in a right direction there. And last but not least, this aggression also revealed one very important fact. I cannot really skip that, because Mr. Kubilius is sitting in front of me and he's a proponent of the trio format. And actually, this aggression very much demonstrated this trio format, bringing together Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, is either dead or it needs a very serious medical treatment because it's not actually working properly at all. So this is, in a nutshell, reality from the ground, from Georgia.
But only on government level.
Yes, on the governmental level. That's very, very true and a very good point. But when it comes to the society, this is, I would say, the last hope when it comes to the Georgia's European future, because this is very high support is there when it comes to Georgia's European integration. It's 80%. It's one of the biggest in the region and also even in some of the EU member states. But also we do see that the government is trying to kind of break this support, to attack this support. For example, back in March this year, the Georgian authorities decided to attack the civil society and adopt the foreign agents law, Russian-style foreign agents law, actually to totally annihilate the very vibrant civil society which we have in the country. So if you're asking me what is the hope is the society, basically. Let's see what will happen. The date of European Commission's report is coming soon, and a lot depends on how the Georgia will continue its road to the EU.
Thank you, Ivane, but I want to know from you, so what is the situation or what is the impact of war, especially in population? Because Georgians know what is the war. So it was 2008. And we have, so our generation has very bad memories. So I personally, 3 wars, I would say, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and then 2008. And so what is the mood in the population about this war? So we have on one hand this Georgian government who says, so please elect us because we promise and we guarantee that the Russian will not begin or start the war on our territory. But at the same time, Georgia people have a big solidarity to Ukrainian, but they are scared. So how do you explain?
Yeah, when it comes to the solidarity of Ukrainians, of course, I mean, not many refugees, like, for example, if you compare the statistics to Moldova, not many of them came to Georgia, like Ukrainian refugees, but those who arrived there, they're actually getting huge support, especially from the people. But also, I have to say that at humanitarian level, the government also tried to provide some kind of assistance to Ukrainians, to be fair on that note. When it comes to this kind of, this artificial, basically, question, which is very much promoted by the ruling party of the Georgian Dream, considering that this trauma of 2008 is still alive and the wounds are not really closed, the Georgian Dream actually tries to artificially put the society to make a choice between the EU integration and the war. So they say that again, it's a kind of invention of the ruling parties, saying that instead of getting the candidate status, European Union is asking us to open the second front against Russia, which of course is absolutely absurd. But considering that society had seen all of this, which you described recently, they're trying now to kind of, if you put them in a corner and you have to make a choice between the peace and the EU integration, most of them consider that peace is much more important than EU integration. But what is very difficult, and we are actually not very successful, we mean here the civil society, is to convince the people that this is not a choice, that you can actually have a peace and you can go to the EU, and going to the EU is actually having peace at the same time, because EU is all about the peace, and all these other dimensions are just built up on that.
Thank you, Ivane. We will continue our discussion about the European future of Georgia with Mr. Schübel. But I want to ask to Leo. So Leo is our Ukrainian voice in our panel. So you listen to your colleagues from Moldova and Georgia, so what they feel and how the security situation and also the mood in the population. Leo, so how is the Ukrainians' view on security situation in neighborhood countries, especially in Moldova and in Georgia, because we see that in both countries Russia is very differently influential. In Moldova, so more influence on the population, and in Georgia, more influence on the government. But we see in both countries we have still a hybrid war. So how, we don't have the opportunity to exchange about this issue between civil society representatives from Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. Now we have this opportunity, and this is very, very sensitive topic, and I'm listening.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a great pleasure, great honor to speak to the audience on this topic. Of course, as people say in Odessa, I cannot talk on behalf of the whole Odessa, but I can tell my opinion. So here I will say as well, I cannot talk on behalf of the whole Ukraine, but I can tell my opinion about your question. And but before doing this, well, thank you for coming to this panel, because the panel downstairs is about post-war, which is not going to happen anytime soon. So I don't claim that they lost their time now, but this panel is more relevant, I think, for the context we are currently having, unfortunately. And second thing, before narrowing down the debate to Georgia and Moldova and Ukraine's view on this, I would like to underline that in Ukraine we see the debate much broader, because the war and the Russian aggression in Ukraine, unfortunately, caused very big disaster, the biggest tragedy I think of this century so far, but at the same time unblocked the debates about the Western Balkans, for instance. Yeah, the countries in Western Balkans, I met 2 weeks ago someone from Western Balkans, and they told, well, maybe we need to have a war so that our chances for EU integration become higher. So it's basically it's a catalyst for certain discussion, for certain debates, because we felt there is basically a deadlock in that region. And also there are other discussions. You need to, before Israel happened, before the events in Israel happened, you can open the US, especially media, and see that there are a lot of discussions about Taiwan in connection with Ukraine. So basically what I'm trying to say is that it goes much more beyond the topic which we have today, but I understand your why you decided to do the setting precisely in this way, because we had the trio which was which the three countries tried to settle, and it was not an easy process as far as I remember, but it happened then. And then the war happened, and then, of course, unfortunately, in Ukraine, we see these developments quite differently. Georgia, I think, is we have the most difficult, maybe, official relations between the governments of Ukraine and the government of Georgia. There is the Georgian ambassador had to leave from Ukraine because of many issues. Of course, there is also on the background discussion about Saakashvili, because he is also an Ukrainian citizen, and many, many other discussions. But of course, there is felt this somehow, aftertaste that in 2008, Ukraine, Yushchenko was flying to Georgia. They tried to mobilize their support, of course, also militarily, but I think from Georgia, Ukraine did not expect military support, but rather moral support. So if, for instance, we would have seen the leaders of Georgia coming to Ukraine and saying, with one voice that we support Ukraine, I don't know the situation in Georgia, because Vano, is the person to answer this question, but I don't think that Russia would have started the war because of this. And second, what unfortunately the history is giving us a lesson that if you behave well, that doesn't mean that Russia won't annex your territory. So unfortunately, this is a very, I mean, I understand, because I'm not saying that I don't understand the reasons or the causes of such a behavior, but this is the way we see it in Ukraine. And when it comes to Moldova, I think, and originally I'm a Moldovan, I moved to Ukraine 13 years ago, but I can say that there is vice versa, as you mentioned. The government is much more reliable in these terms, and I see that the relations between official Chisinau and Kyiv are very warm. But they had also a very difficult start. Just remember the beginning of the war, Moldova was not very outspoken about the Russian aggression in Ukraine. And I think the reason was clear, because they thought if Russia is able to break through Odessa region, then they would basically occupy Moldova as well. So that was the main, I think, reason, to put it shortly, behind this this behavior. Now I see that in Ukraine there are calls that Moldova has the right moments to fix the Transnistrian issue. I don't know how realistic are these calls, yeah, because I don't think Moldova has, first, the capacity, and second, the courage to fix the Transnistrian conflict in the way some of the people in Ukraine are calling for. Yeah? So I think, and say it again?
This is which way?
Well, you understand, it's just to enter and take control of Transnistria. These are the calls of some officials in Ukraine say. I'm not sure this would be the best option. I mean, we still have to calculate, but I think over the last months, since the dialogue between Moldova and Ukraine is more intense and I would say more open, I see this topic is being not sidelined, but is being avoided. So I think there is a better understanding, and I think it's important for Ukraine that the Transnistrian conflict is solved in such a way that it does not pose a risk to Ukraine and to Moldova, of course. But Ukraine looks first above all at its own interest. So I'm of course very much worried about the security of these countries, but I'd like to mention that unfortunately a lot will depend on the outcome of the war in Ukraine. Yeah? If we manage to win the war and Russia is defeated, because there are still people in some countries that are not able to say that they want to see a Ukrainian victory, and some people are still believe this is not possible. I mean, and the goal defines the means. If you have the goal to win, then we get the means, we mobilize the means for Ukraine to win. I have a T-shirt with a message, Taurus for Ukraine. This is a very important question. I just had earlier this day some meetings with German officials, and I understand that it's not closed, but I also remember that before, when we were meeting with Germans, our partners here in Berlin, and we were just proposing something like, let's look at this situation, they would answer, unglaublich, or something like so. It's not possible, it's unthinkable. But then we get the Leopard coalition, we got so many things, and yesterday I'm so grateful for the another package which was announced by Germany for Ukraine, 1 billion package with very much needed Patriot system and all their defense and 155 rounds and all the stuff we get. And I see this the most important condition for the security of Georgia and Moldova. Moldova, I mean, it's also in a very advantageous situation because of geography. Yeah? I all the time tell, when we do campaign advocacy about NATO, we all the time say, get one country and receive two. Basically, if you accept Ukraine into NATO, you get also solved the issues basically in Moldova. I mean, you can still spoil things. I mean, if you want to, of course. And some countries in Eastern Europe shows this, reminds us of that we can still spoil things if we want. But overall, I think this is the biggest outcome. And I think, do I still have 1-2 minutes? Yeah?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. I'll stick then to the last idea maybe. But I'll also answer to other questions later on if we have. But the idea I wanted to say that I see this approach that persists in DC, in Berlin, in some other capitals. Let's boil this frog slowly, yeah? This is the approach. Let's not create any shakes on the front. Let's think 10 times, 100 times before we send something to Ukraine. Look, and then we think about reconstruction. We make panels about reconstruction. When everything is destroyed, when millions of people, of Ukrainians, left their country, and it's maybe not the best, but since I'm a think tanker, I think I can say this, we want these people back. We want 7 million or how many people left, we want them back. Because Ukraine cannot do economic growth, fund the budget, and be less dependent on your support, on Germany's support, on the support of our country. And last message, here is really last, and very important, I think this is like top question for Ukraine, is getting the Russian money work for the Ukrainian security. We have more than 300 billion of euros which are frozen in most of them in EU countries, some of them in the US, but not much. And this money should be used for the Ukraine defense. I mean, this is not only a question of morale, but a question, I mean, you know, I understand many people who say, well, you know, we cannot endlessly fund.
Is it legal? Is it legal?
Well, is it legal? I mean, I don't know. Before we heard about many issues which were not legal, suddenly became legal. I know that what we can do now, at least by the end of the year, is to seize the interest rate from the funds which are frozen, because there is a, according to our calculation, it's about 1 billion euros, the interest rate, yearly. So we can use this money, but I think it's our duty to, why do we have to ask? I mean, there is, of course, the moral argument, but the money are there. The Russians attacked Ukraine. They're destroying our country. So why do we have to, I mean,
I think you passed our last debate about the Crimea War in Ukraine, so it was.
I was at the Chancellery office trying to speak about Taurus.
It was very disappointed because we talk about the legal system and we talk about how it is possible, but I don't know, Mr. Schübel, you can correct me. So if you are more hopeful or optimistic that the crime war and Mr. Putin personally can arrested or responsible, and so we have results in the end. But it is in the moment, and there are a lot of legal questions. But thank you very much, Leo, for your statement. I was surprised, and I'm very glad to hear that in Moldova there are discussions about the NATO and NATO membership, because I think for 2 years ago it was a little bit taboo topic in Moldova, right? And Ukraine and Georgia was always front-runner to move forward into NATO integration. We cannot say this now about Georgia because our Premier Minister said that now NATO is not our priority. We have unresolved and we have conflict territories, etc. So the question is to Mr. Schübel. So we know that the NATO question is very difficult. Even the population in all these three countries are for the NATO integration. So we have one option, and this is EU. And the question is the EU able now to rethink the security dimension or to support these countries in this hybrid war, what is led from Russia? So do you see any instruments, or so how can EU act?
Thank you very much, first of all. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. I'm always very happy to be with civil society. And in the last year in my new job, I've been almost on a daily basis with civil society members. So I feel I know more the vox populi than the vox of the governments sometimes. I hope my voice will hold because I was come out of a big flu. But I wanted to start with one comment to Leo on Transnistria, if I may, before I answer your question. I was, among others, also the EU ambassador to Moldova from 2009 to 2013. And in 1 year, I think it was in 2011, the then Prime Minister Filat decided to organize a big military parade on the National Day, 27th of August, on the main street or place in Chisinau. And there were about 8,000 soldiers parading up and down the road. And I think it was the Minister of Defense who I was standing next to, and he told me, that's the Moldovan army. If Transnistrians or the Russians will attack now, there's zero protection. What I want to say is, I'm not so sure whether 8,000 Moldovan soldiers will be able to capture Transnistria, even if they tried. But that's a personal comment. But the discussion should indeed be led, and the chance is there now. But that's another topic. But I just wanted to talk about my memory of the 8,000 Moldovan soldiers marching up and down the road, which was the entire army that they had. EU security policy. I think the first thing to say is that the biggest step to ensure to increase or to change our security policy was taken in June last year, which was to give the candidate country status to both Ukraine and Moldova, and to give the accession perspective to Georgia. I think that is really a step to make the future more secure in our eastern neighborhood, to go that far, because the closer these countries will be with us, with the European Union, the more they implement our legislation, the more they follow the rule of law as we understand it in the European Union, the more secure also the eastern neighborhood and these countries will be. So that's one thing. But coming back to our ambition to be a geopolitical actor that we have set many a time, I think we have also been pushed by the European Parliament a lot, the EU member states. Andrius Kubilius know what I'm talking about. And we have done indeed, it was a quantum change in June 2022. We have suddenly started to organize military support. Who would have thought 3 years ago that the EU would ever finance military means to be delivered to third countries? Unheard of. We have managed to collect by now, through the European Peace Facility, more than 25 billion euros in terms of military support for Ukraine. That's both EU and member states support, which is 1/3 of the overall support that we have given so far to Ukraine. We have set up a separate mission, a new mission, the third one, by the way, that we have, but the first EU military advisory mission that we have, which is there, which is not based in Ukraine for obvious reasons. It is there to train Ukrainian soldiers in the European Union. The place where this takes place is kept secret for good reasons, but in the meantime, more than 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained already, which is more than double the original objective, basically. Another big step in terms of security. So Ukraine obviously was the number one priority in making the EU change their security policy. We were basically forced to go this way, to take this step. But I think we have not limited our change in security policy only to Ukraine. We have set up new missions, one in Moldova, by the way, a new mission, and also one in Armenia, which has been very much appreciated by the Armenian government and by the Armenian people. We are looking now whether we can increase the staffing of the mission a little bit to help Armenia also this way. We can talk about this if you have a question later on. And we have, of course, also been active on the highest level. President Michel has become very active, first in Georgia, by the way. Some people have forgotten this. He was acting as a mediator between the two sides in Georgia. It didn't work out the way that we wanted it, but it was not a failure at the time. It led to a temporary agreement. So that was also something new in terms of our engagement. And, of course, the so-called Brussels process that Charles Michel has initiated to bring the two leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan together in Brussels in a trilateral format to try to get them not only closer together but also to an agreement, to a peace treaty. Obviously, this process was interrupted by the additional Azerbaijani attacks on the rest of Nagorno-Karabakh, as we all have seen. That is exactly what we did not want to and what we tried to avoid. Unfortunately, it has happened, and this has led to 90% of the population of Nagorno-Karabakh having left the area and went to Armenia. That is another topic that we need to follow very closely, but the Brussels process as such is alive. We are currently trying to organize another meeting of this trio, of this trilateral setup, possibly still in October, maybe in November, if President Aliyev agrees, because Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia is very ready to do so. So also another example of our increased security activities, if I may say so. We have also increased our engagement with Central Asia. It is going a little bit beyond of our topic today, but I think it's important to say that the Central Asians, many of them, as soon as Russia started its full-fledged attack on Ukraine, started to become more cautious in their relations with Russia, also some of them being afraid that the same could happen to them. In Kazakhstan, there's a big Russian minority, as we know. So we have seen a closer outreach of Central Asia to the European Union, and we have been happily engaging with a number of summits and high-level meetings with Central Asians, which we want to continue. And last but not least, perhaps to mention that we have launched security dialogues with 5 out of the 6 Eastern Partnership countries. You can imagine which one is the one we don't have a security dialogue with, which is obviously Belarus. But with all the others, we have a security dialogue in which we discuss all the issues at stake, domestic security, but also, of course, questions of international security. And that has been very much appreciated in all the countries, in particular also in the Caucasus, in the 3 countries, in Georgia and in Azerbaijan and Armenia. But as I said, we have similar dialogues with Moldova and with Ukraine. With Ukraine, we're talking security every day, basically. President Zelensky was in Brussels today, not with the EU only, but mainly with NATO for another meeting to discuss further military support, but still. So what I want to sum it up, I think we have really learned the lesson. What we have been doing over the last 2 years, I think nobody would have dreamed of 3 years ago even. We have become a serious player in the security area. We have always been laughed at by some of others. And I think we are taken serious. We're working closely, of course, with our partners, US, UK, other NATO members, partners, Norway, and that will continue. So I think we have taken on this role, and we will, I think there's no way back, if you ask me, from that. I'll stop with that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's very nice to hear it, and so you're right. So for 2 years ago, we cannot imagine or we cannot dream on it. So it was always the answer: EU cannot be geopolitical actor, or EU cannot strengthen the security dimension in Eastern Partnership countries, because it was always the big country. It was Russia, and nobody wanted to make Russia angry. So I hope this is over. And I would like to ask one question, and then I will open the round for questions. And answers. So I have one question to all panelists, and this is about the role of the European reform processes, because all these countries are in these processes now, so we are expecting the reports of the European Commission in the beginning of November, and the European Commission will say, so what are the next steps for Ukraine and Moldova on the way to EU, and if Georgia can get the candidate status. So it would be recommendations to the European Council. And Vano, I would start with you. So how can you explain the role of the EU reform processes in Georgia, and especially, so what does it mean for the stabilization of security in Georgia? Also, do you see any connection with these reforms and also the security?
When it comes to the reforms, as I was mentioning during my intervention, actually, let's start from the point that this process of EU membership or EU accession brought a fresh momentum to Georgia-EU relations, because since 2007, I would say, 2017, till very last moment when Georgia submitted the application, that was pretty lukewarm ties between EU and Georgia, because Georgia thought that it achieved everything, which was what was on the table, having an association agreement, the CFTA, visa liberalization, and there was nothing else to kind of, to deliver and to push for. After this submission of the application, and very largely thanks to Ukraine, because Ukraine managed to open that door, the reform process actually gained the new momentum. And everything was much, and is still very much dependent on this, everything, all the debates goes around those 12 priorities. But when it comes to the 12 priorities, we do see that EU still has the leverage there. One example is there's a topic related to the de-oligarchization. And if we follow the debates in Georgia, what Georgian Dream was saying is that there is no oligarch in Georgia. That was like an initial assessment, initial statement. Then they started to say that there are the oligarchs, but Bidzina Ivanishvili is not oligarch. Then they changed their mind, and they were saying that EU should take out this priority from the list, and this is not kind of fair treatment. And very last moment, when Mr. Borrell was visiting in Tbilisi, they decided to send the action plan on de-oligarchization to the Venice Commission. So what I wanted to say with this is that actually still there is a leverage from the EU side, but what we see is that the Georgian Dream is always trying to kind of imitate reforms or just to neglect them. And anything that I already mentioned that might pose any risks to them, they are just trying to have just, general and very shallow kind of, approach to this process. So, yeah, it's a very kind of, uneven approach when it comes to the reforming, the rule of law or court system, etc., etc.
Thank you. Natalia?
Thank you for your question. As you know, Moldova had 9 conditions, and I can say that we have success in implementation of these conditions in majority, but very problematic issue is anti-corruption reform, in spite of the fact that we have some results in this field. And also it's reform of the judicial system. It's practically, from my point of view, without any significant results, unfortunately, but it's true. And I want to say that, of course, it's very important to implement this condition. Of course, it's very important for our country to have support from the part of the EU. But it's not only for the reporting mechanisms. It for our country, first of all. And I think that we need to find solution, optimal solution in this process. Thank you.
Same question. Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, indeed, I think Ukraine demonstrated one very important, how to say, not idea, but one very important thing is that we can do reforms despite the war. And this is a very important achievement. Not all the reforms, I think, are in line with the 7 steps which were put on the table with the candidate status. But here we have something, so 30 seconds of publicity. I have here a candidate check monitoring. What we do here, we have a wide civil society coalition, sectoral, who are, and this is already the 5th edition. We check all the reforms which are aligned with the 7 steps, and we have 8.1, this is the latest, out of 10. The government says that we are more critical than the reports of the European Commission. We say this is good for democracy. But overall, we agree on certain issues, but on other issues we disagree. For instance, on the reform of Constitutional Court, we are much more skeptical than the EU is. Maybe because we see things differently, but why this is important, why these reforms are important with the accession process. When the accession talks start, I hope the decision is being taken in December at the Council. And if this decision is taken, the civil society, think tanks, society at large, EU member states will have a much greater influence on the reform agenda. And this is something we will have, well, we will have an additional instrument basically to put pressure on our government to do better, to do more. But again, I'm coming from Kiev. When you see all what happens in our country, when you hear this, all the explosions, I all the time say we need NATO. We need NATO, and because, I mean, of course, these reforms are all necessary for our country, and not only for our country, for Moldova, for Georgia as well. But what is the sense of doing these reforms if the whole Ukraine could be occupied? I mean, of course, I don't think this would happen, but at some, I mean, the question is this, yeah? So without security, it doesn't make any sense. Security is top priority. And weapons, and here I have, I see Dirk was quite modest in actually praising the EU, because I think EU has done a very good job in raising to the expectations we had in Ukraine. EU provided 76 billion in support, 25 almost through European Peace Facility and the member states' contributions to the military. But also we had the 18 billion package, and we hope we'll have the facility on 50 billion coming from next year for the until 27. Why this is important? Because this gives us the possibility to take care about reforms, about security, and it also gives the possibility to push back on the argument of Russia that Ukraine will go bankrupt at some point, and then we can, you know, do what we were intending to do, basically. So I think this is indeed, and one disappointment, and again, I'm from civil society, I can say this, is NATO. I mean, when the war started, the expectations from NATO and the EU were so much different, and of course the biggest expectations were from NATO. And then we saw that this is not the case, and even after Vilnius summit we have this bitter taste of what happened there. I mean, it's not depressing, but it's slightly disappointing. But we still have a chance to correct this at the Washington summit next year. Well, the timing is quite bad because of US elections, yeah? Because of, I don't know where is parliamentary EU elections. Next year as well, yeah. In June, so it's, yeah, well, summit is likely in July, so we still, we are past the European elections, but the US elections, of course, we see this happening these days, and it's very disappointing.
Thank you. So now you can ask the questions. Yes, of course. Of course.
But I can also go to questions. No, just briefly on. Fully agree with what all the colleagues said. I think if we remember the original goal of the European neighbourhood policy, it was to have a stable ring of friends around the European Union from east to south, meaning to create economic and political stability in our neighbourhood, because that would be good for us. So now we are, of course, 1 or 2 steps further by having the candidate country status, and maybe soon more for Ukraine and for Moldova, and hopefully soon the candidate country status for Georgia. All our agreements, association agreements or other agreements, have one goal: to create a legal environment, or an environment which is similar to ours, to the European Union one, so that we can operate and with these and be not only trading and investing, but also have relations in other fields in a similar way as we are used to from inside the European Union. And all the missions, by the way, almost all the missions that we have set up in the Eastern Partnership countries, some of which I mentioned already, all serve this purpose. The first one, maybe we can even say, is the EU advisory mission in Kiev, in Ukraine, which served exactly the purpose to create interior stability, security also in Ukraine. They have now branch offices all over Ukraine. We had one in Mariupol as well, by the way. That is gone, as you can imagine. But that will continue, of course. We have set up a mission with a similar objective now in Moldova, also to contributing, fighting hybrid threats. We talked about this before as well. So all of this serves the purpose of creating stability. So the reform process is of utmost importance, as we believe, to create a level playing field that allows us to be in contact with them, to have proper rule of law, to have a proper constitutional law, to have human rights respected, for that matter. That is a very important point as well. Not in all our Eastern Partnership countries, unfortunately, the case. Fight against corruption was mentioned. That is something where we have a different approach, maybe, if I may say this, in the new member states. I don't dare saying anymore, it's too long. But in the East and in the West, this will play a very important role for the next steps, even now for the reports that are coming out, hopefully on the 8th of November. Fight against corruption will be looked at very carefully, our analysis and our reports in countries like the Netherlands, in France, in Germany as well. It will play a very important role, while in the Eastern countries maybe other subjects will play a more prominent role than that. But what I want to say is work on all these subjects is necessary and of utmost importance to bring the countries forward, even though, as I think was said before, in the end, of course, the countries do the reforms for themselves in the first place to guarantee their people a proper life. I'll stop here.
Kamajorba, Matthias Brückmann. I have a question on Georgia. You said the hope of your hope is on the Georgian society. I just came back from Georgia, from Tiflis and other regions in Georgia. How divided is the Georgian society? You have tens of thousands of Russians who fled the country, who fled the regime of President Putin. And you have, when you go to the Black Sea, you have hundreds of thousands Russian tourists. And you have these graffitis in Tiflis and elsewhere where it's written, Russians shut up, fuck Russia, and so on, yes? But on the other hand, there are a lot of businessmen, of apartment owners, hotel owners, tour operators, restaurants, and so on, which are, of course, talking to you on Russian, because that are their clients. So my question is, how divided is the society? And the question to the EU would be, a lot of Russians are now in Georgia because they are limited to flee to Kazakhstan for 90 days. Then they have to leave because of the pressure of Russia. And so is there pressure from the European Union to allow Russians to live in Kazakhstan for a longer time? And the what you mentioned on the Georgian government, I pretty well understand this. But also for former governments in Ukraine, what was their alternative than this kind of swing policy? You have a huge neighbor, Russia, which already occupied a fifth of your territory, or we know all the situation in Ukraine. And then you have the European Union. And the European Union first time said to Ukraine, you will be a member of the EU sometime. That was the first time mentioned in 2022. Which government of Kuchma, Kravchuk, Yushchenko could have a policy towards NATO and EU if you don't have the fully support of the West, and it's also of the politics and the government of Georgia? I do not see really an alternative for them.
Maybe we can collect.
Yeah, thank you. Maria Rybko from Ukraine. I also have to probably one point and one question on Georgia. Just first, I will start with the thought and then come to question. I just cannot help but think about the nightmare scenario on Georgian civil society future, because I'm looking at Belarus and I see what Lukashenko have done with Belarusian civil society in 2020, and a lot of reports on tortures and so on and so forth. So the guys were just unarmed. They went to the street when the situation really started to look really bad, but they were totally unprepared. And we see that Belarus is now just a proxy of Russia. So I'm really worried about the civil society in Georgia if you have such, I would say, worrisome situation. And my question, I know that Georgia is one of the countries which is really pretty heavily involved in the sanctions evasion. So from the European Union, a lot of companies still export the goods, the electronics, which are like under the Code 84 and 85, which are not allowed to export to Russia, but the exports of these goods to Georgia, to Kazakhstan, to other countries has increased several folds. So my question is, do you feel that anything could be done on behalf of Ukraine or the European Union to prevent that, if, like, as Georgian?
Thank you. My name is Imma Hillerich. I'm living in Berlin. I'm friend of Leonid. And I wanted to know, how do you fight against corruption in your countries? Because it's a very important criterion for the membership in the EU. You showed very proudly the 8.1 points. Is fight against corruption in these points, or isn't it? That's my question.
Yes, thank you. My first question is for Ivane Chkhikvadze. So we have heard a lot about the situation. I would like to know your expert opinion about the European Commission answer. What to expect in a month, and how do you assess the risks of destabilization in your country? And of course, I have too many questions for Mr. Schübel. And first one is, so everything more or less is clear with the associated trio. Now let's come to Armenia and Azerbaijan. So in case of Armenia, the recent steps to diversify the foreign policy by the Armenian government is the deployment of the EU monitoring mission. It is the, for example, the last week announced joint statement by Pashinyan and Leonid. And beside that, the negotiations in the Brussels platform. All these steps are met aggressively by Russia. And now we can see some elements of hybrid war. The propaganda machine is working actively. Some political parties that are proxy of Russia, they became more active, and they are trying to destabilize the situation in Armenia. How do you see, how the Brussels see the perspective of EU-Armenia relations? And coming to Azerbaijan, so Aliyev, he broke his promise, as Annalena Baerbock said he violated his commitments and initiated an aggression which resulted in ethnic cleansing of more than 100,000 ethnic Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh. All these will affect on the negotiation process between EU and Azerbaijan. We know that there is a new document which is in the negotiation phase. Will it affect any way or not? Thank you.
I would suggest, Ivane, you will start with questions about Georgia very shortly, then Mr. Schübel about the sanctions and Armenia, and we all three about anti-corruption reforms.
Sure. I'll go ahead with starting with the question from our colleague from Ukraine. When it comes to the civil society, just my reflection actually, indeed, there's a huge pressure, enormous pressure on the civil society. I was listening to Leo when he was presenting this, and I just, noticed his assessment that government is criticizing them, that they are harsher than the European Commission when it comes to the assessment. And in our case, they are not criticizing us. They are calling us as a state traitor because we are doing pretty much a similar exercise. You see the difference when it comes to the approaches, what we have in Ukraine for the same reason, for the same exercise, and in case of Georgia. Every time we are presenting that report, we are immediately becoming the state traitors. When it comes to in the long run, I think that, again, nobody in Georgia believes that the war with the government on freedom is won, because we don't believe that just the thing that they decided and stepped back when it comes to the adoption of the Russian-style law on foreign agents is something that they would stop there, because the objective of that law is there. It has not really disappeared. So I do think that this battle should continue. We have no other choice. Just to fight for our freedom and for the to make sure that we are still there in the country. But we also hope that the European Union is very outspoken in these processes. We do appreciate the support which came from the EU, from the member states, from the US when it was a very crucial moment of adopting that law back in March. But it should not stop there. It should continue. So this is kind of my wish when it comes to this. When it comes to the sanctions, okay. There are a lot of talks on that, and we also sometimes is suspicious and these questions are emerging. But at the same time, some 3 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, there was a visit of people who are dealing with the sanctions from UK, from EU, and from US. And the public statement they actually made was pretty much not in line what are these questions and kind of suspicious. They basically said that Georgia is doing okay when it comes to kind of alignment to this to impose sanctions against Russia. So I guess that the most important thing is having the evidences. It's not easy, I fully understand, but at the same time having these statements and in parallel having the visit of the 3 top people there, then they are saying that there is no evasion. It's kind of pretty contradictory. So coming to your question about the Russian tourists, unfortunately the government is actually very much using and misusing it. Considering that there are a lot of Russians coming to Georgia, we do see this pretty high economic growth. And every time our prime minister is actually boasting with that. For example, last year there was a double-digit economic growth. But the issue is that this is a very kind of type of mirage, which might disappear at a certain point. Unfortunately, this is a problem of short sight, because those people who you probably met who are in the hospitality business, they're more or less happy with that. But it might not stay there for a longer period of time. It's very volatile. And plus, some part of society actually we are very much against the restoration of the flights, direct flights with Russia when the government decided on that. Unfortunately, we are in that process where we are, that Russians are there. But I don't believe that this is something that the society in the long run, when it comes to the calculation, would be kind of changing it instead of the Georgia's EU integration. And maybe last point about expectations. Well, it depends. Every day it's changing, you know. Today I have a feeling that we would not get it. Tomorrow I have a feeling that we will still get it. So we are basically getting ready for both kinds of scenarios. And when it comes to this decision, if it happens in case of yes or in case of no answer, I think that this should be very much accompanied with a very clear communication from EU side. Why this is made? Because we do see that Georgian government is very much using its propaganda and saying that if it is not given, that would be fault of everyone except the Georgian dream, and if it is given, that would be just, you know, the credit for the Georgian dream. So in case any type of decisions, there should be a very clear communication from the EU side.
Thank you, Vanu.
Yes, I wanted to start with the question on anti-corruption. We have these three sets of steps, as we have called it originally, or conditions for Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, 7, 9, and 12 in terms of numbers. And I think only two of them have a very concrete anti-corruption condition in, which is Ukraine and Moldova. Why? Because for many years, Georgia has indeed been the front runner, as it was said before, but it is indirectly, it is, of course, also some rule of law related conditionalities which are touching upon fight against corruption as well. Now, on Russian citizens or in Georgia and elsewhere, the first thing I have to say is I think there's two different groups of Russians who have fled to Georgia. There's one who are opposition who had to flee because they would have probably been arrested, or they're you know, singers and whatever who had to flee, which I think they deserve support and they deserve to be respected. And then there's another group who has simply fled the war, young male guys who didn't want to go to the war, but it doesn't mean that they're against Putin. They might not be. And then we don't know who of those are not even working for others, for other services and institutions among those in Georgia. But that's a question that is not for us. Unfortunately, we have no leverage on to tell any government, be it in Georgia, be it in Kazakhstan, how many Russians they should take on and how long they should be able to stay or not. That is beyond our responsibilities, unfortunately. But we're looking, of course, carefully on what is happening there. I was in Georgia myself a couple of months ago, and I noticed the same, that Russian has become the dominant language in Tbilisi streets, which is a big change from before. Now, sanctions evasion. We are, of course, aware that that there are a number of countries where the bilateral trade relations with Russia have skyrocketed over the last year or one and a half, and we're looking very carefully into this. And some countries of the Southern Caucasus are part of those. Some Central Asian countries as well. And for that reason, we have established a new job, if you want. We have a special envoy on sanctions, a very high former official of the European Union, David O'Sullivan, who is traveling from country to country and is trying to explain very carefully what consequences this would have if it is really true that sanctions are evaded by company X or Y, sometimes even by state companies under suspicion. So we are looking carefully into this, and we have not yet gone that far as the Americans have done, for instance, to impose indirect sanctions, if you want, sanctions on those companies who are suspected of evading the sanctions regime of the European Union. The Americans have done that. Now, on Armenia, I think the perspective of EU-Armenia relations is very good. We have good prospects. We're looking right now into possibilities how we can strengthen our relations, also given the situation in which Armenia is now, after Nagorno-Karabakh is lost, basically, if we are honest to ourselves. We're looking into possibilities how to provide you with more financial support to government. We are looking into possibilities whether there is, in the medium run, also talks on a visa-free regime possible. There is talks on whether we could come back to the discussions on the association agreement, on upgrading the agreement that, as you know, was skipped in 2013 by then President Saksyan on pressure by Putin. So we're looking into this, whether we can maybe look at the old agreement from 2013 and see what can be done to upgrade it a little bit, and a number of other steps that we want to take. Military support, we have not gone that far as France has so far. I think we need a stabilization first a little bit. We need a peace treaty in the best case scenario between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which we, as I said before, hope we will get to in not too far a future. I think the chances are there still. Armenia is ready. Now we're waiting for Mr. Aliyev to agree. He didn't go to Granada, as you know, but we hope to see him in Brussels soon or in any other place. Aliyev himself suggested recently Tbilisi as a new mediation place. But let's see what happens. But the perspectives look good. We're also looking at the mission, as I said, whether there's a possibility to upgrade the mission in terms of personnel a little bit. And of course, humanitarian support we are providing already, by the way, for the refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh who have arrived in Armenia. Azerbaijan. Yeah, one phrase only. I doubted that there will be steps in terms of sanctions or anything. The EU-Azerbaijan negotiations on the new agreement are stuck since 4 years because Azerbaijan doesn't move on some very simple or some issues. We have 90 to 95% of the agreement is agreed, so we need simply some last steps to be taken by them. So the ball is basically in their court and not even in ours. Otherwise, I don't see that you get a majority of 27 member states or a unanimity of 27 member states agreeing on sanctions or on negative steps on Azerbaijan. Some might want to, but there's others who don't. So I fear that will not be happening. I'll stop here.
Thank you. So very quickly, Leo, because the next panel already started. Our last panel.
I can try, but this is a PhD question, basically. But in very short, we have a couple of things happening. First, these 7 conditions, 7 steps, include anti-corruption measures. But Dirk might correct me, but these are not meant to, to actually fight corruption, but to create the necessary conditions for the corruption to be prevented, to be investigated. And so that's the difference, because in both our societies corruption happens, but the difference is that in your society there is an investigation and conviction, and in our society there is less kind of these cases, So we would like that we don't not only identify corruption, but also make people who are responsible for corruption to be convicted and to pay their price for what they did. And one recent, in this respect with the preconditions, most of this was implemented. I mean, I can give you an example, just the appointment of the specialized anti-corruption prosecutor, which was not being done for quite a long time, but when these steps were put down, Ukraine did this quite fast. But a very innovative thing which happened recently in Ukraine is that if you uncover corruption and you report to the specialized anti-corruption prosecutor and the other authorities who deal with the fight of corruption, and if they prove that this indeed happened, the corruption case, then you get 10% of the damage which was done to the state or in the corruption case. And 2 weeks ago we had the first case when a person received 13 million hryvnias. I don't know how much is it. It's a lot of money because he uncovered a case of big corruption in the state. So I think this is very positive, although I still think it will take years. I mean, I'm skeptical. Let me still be skeptical until the otherwise is proved.
Okay. First of all, I want to say that it was special mission to our pro-European president, Maya Sandu, who has very good reputation, and practically her pre-election program were focused on this issue, and she tried to clean. It's her what to clean, first of all, political system. That's why I think that main activities were focused, first of all, on the legislation changes in this sense, integration special practice, and of course, best practices of the EU countries. That's all.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you for coming and for listening and for your interest. So our conference continues. So we have last panel. Please stay with us.